students, staff, faculty, and guests. My name is Lauren Morrison, and I am a senior psychology major with a minor in bioethics here at LMU. On campus, I am president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I have been heavily involved in conversations with administration for Black at LMU. Thank you for coming to the LMU Anti-Racism Project Year 1 Review and Reflection. To start, we will have a brief moment of silence to honor the life of Daunte Wright, a Black man who was recently murdered by a police officer in Minnesota following a traffic stop. Thank you for joining me in the moment of silence. At this time, I am pleased to present our 16th president, who has championed Jesuit education as a professor and administrator for more than 30 years. In his statement, Beyond Words, President Snyder made a pledge to LMU's Black community and set LMU on a course in which anti-racism is prioritized for the entire university. Please join me in welcoming President and Professor Timothy Law Snyder.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for that moment of silence for Daunte Wright. All here should know that Lauren is not just one of our remarkable student leaders, but also a person whom I see on a fast track to greatness, especially as we seek to, as we say at LMU, create the world we want to live in. So no pressure, Lauren, but I do know you can handle it. I begin with acknowledgement of the Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of Tongva, and that is the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, study, create, and be in this place. I am also grateful to our speakers, to our facilitators who are with us today. They have dedicated their talents, their insights, their love for LMU and for our anti-racism project. I thank our trustee, Judge Irma Brown, who's our Board of Trustees DEI liaison, for helping us continue to realize our goals. And Irma, it's great to have you with us today. My heart abounds with gratitude for Vice President Jennifer Abe, for our Office of Intercultural Affairs, members of our Student Affairs Division, Ethnic and Intercultural Affairs, and the Anti-Racism Project Squad. And that is today's virtual and forum planning team is part of that team. I thank each of you for rallying our community, and it's good to see so many here. Our Anti-Racism Project leaders are uplifted by the members of our schools, our colleges, our divisions, our departments, and every one of our learning communities. I am proud and indebted to each of you for sharing your hearts, for sharing your inner beings on so many DEI committees, associations, councils, and affinity groups, and not just those formal, but also those informal, which have helped us continue to make some progress. This has required persistence. It has required determination to make LMU better. And so much of our work together has taken place during one of the most difficult years of our lives, if not the most difficult year for many of us at that. So I thank you for helping shape the future of that world that we seek to create together. Of course, I think we all know creating a better world is not without its challenges. It's not without setbacks. Anytime we create, we are not without failures. And today we will hear about ways in which we have succeeded, ways in which we have indeed failed. And we should understand we need failures because failure is always an accompaniment when we seek, particularly in ways risky, to create a better world. So we each continually strive to do better. And I think this needs to be for us a mainstay as a sort of communal mantra that we continually strive. And this is all in accordance with St. Ignatius's Magis, what we typically call in short, the better, but what I call the restless desire to create a better world. This year, we have indeed have some accomplishments of which we can be proud, and you'll certainly see them during our time together. I emphasize these are just a start. Our commitment to anti-racism, to diversity, to equity, to inclusion is central to our emerging strategic plan. And that, of course, will be woven into everything we do as we go forward. And of course, we also must understand that anytime one is seeking to implement a cultural change, the more people we can have with us, rather than just what we typically refer to proverbially as our choir, the better off we are. So in the future, anytime we are going to one of these events, let's bring an accompanist who can be with us for support and also mutual love of the undergoing work or the ongoing work in which we have engaged. I'm happy to turn the program now back over to Lauren. I probably should have mentioned Lauren is one of our hashtag Black at LMU student leaders, and she will share some words with you to kick our program off. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, President Snyder. So anti-racism is such a broad term, and to truly understand the weight and implications of a project intended to address anti-racism, it's important to get more specific. So the Anti-Racism Project is specifically intended to address patterns of racism as it pertains to anti-Black racism, in addition to forms of racism experienced by other underrepresented and marginalized populations. Unfortunately, racism has been so heavily integrated into the university system that this looks like overturning a lot of systems that we're familiar with. This includes intentional efforts to diversify the existing body of students, staff, and faculty, directing existing funding towards areas meant to support marginalized students, revising fundraising models to ensure students from underrepresented backgrounds can afford to come to LMU and actually stay here. Through my contributions to this project, it is my hope that the students coming after me will see the fruits of our labor. In that way, LMU will not only be a stepping stone on the path to higher education, but it will offer an environment that intentionally facilitates the growth of underrepresented students because it has been restructured to support them. Tonight, you will hear various speakers, all of which are intended to increase awareness about the anti-racist work done at LMU and facilitate a reflection period where we can think about what has been done, what plans are currently in place, and what can be done moving forward to further this mission. We hope that the reports on progress that has already been made will provide a basis for accountability and serve as a beacon of hope for changes that are to come for students from marginalized communities. We are now going to watch a brief clip about the Anti-Racism Project this year to help set the stage for today's reflection.
Good afternoon. My name is Elsie Mattes. I am a senior political science major, and this year I've had the privilege to serve as the 8th LMU Vice President. It is an honor to join you all for this critical conversation. At the 1-year mark of LMU's own anti-racist effort, it is clear that transforming a university into an anti-racist institution is a comprehensive effort, and in order for this work to be sustained, we must have buy-in at every single level. It is now my great pleasure to introduce campus leadership who will share their own reflections on what it has meant to serve as division leaders as our departments engage in these anti-racist efforts. We will first hear from Senior Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Lainey Beauvais, followed by Executive Vice President and Provost Tom Poon, who will then be followed by Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer Lynn Scarborough.
Thank you, Elsie. I have 3 overall comments. The first is a thank you. The second is a historical perspective. And the third has to do with the work that is ongoing in the Division of Student Affairs. So first, thank you. And in Jesuit tradition, I have 3 thank yous. I'd like to thank President Snyder for taking on the issue of systemic racism and for his commitment in declaring LMU will become an anti-racist institution. This is no easy task. The work is difficult, and it will take us some time to reach its destination. But having it declared an institutional priority and having it part of the strategic plan by the president is a critical first step. So thank you. My second thank you is to Jennifer Abe. Jennifer, I've been really impressed by your calmness, your tenacity, and your dedication to listening intently in order to move the issues forward. You've made sense of all the competing issues and have given us a structure for moving forward in hiring, in climate and culture, and in education. I know this work is difficult and it's also emotionally draining. And in some ways, it's a pretty thankless job as everyone has a better way of doing it. My third thank you is to our students who have led the way and have pushed the university to look inward and to recognize the role it has played in maintaining systemic racism. The student voice has played a very important role in helping the university become a better version of itself. And as we move forward in the future and sustain this effort, it will really be incumbent upon the students to help forge that way. My second comment has to do with historical perspective regarding racial diversity at LMU. One of the advantages to having been around for a long time is that you can actually see that change has happened. That doesn't mean that we are perfect, and it doesn't mean that we don't have a lot more work to do, and we can always do better because it is always about continuous improvement. But positive change in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion has definitely taken place over the last 40 years. We have policies, procedures, programs, and personnel in place to respond to diversity issues. We are in the enviable position of not starting at ground zero. We are in the mode, the additive mode. We are adding to what we already have. We are refining what we already have. And we are now doing the deep interior work. I see this moment in LMU's history vis-a-vis racial injustice as very different than in my previous 40 years. For me, the difference manifests itself in 2 ways. First, there is pervasive buy-in for changing LMU throughout the university. And secondly, there is commitment by leadership to authentic change. My third comment has to do with student affairs and the work that we're doing in student affairs. I'm very proud of our collective willingness to be better, to be more diverse, to be more inclusive, and to be a more equitable division. There is a true eagerness to be sure that we are responding to our students fairly and justly. Our plan is to review every student affairs policy and procedure and to do an audit of every department. In addition to being sure that our policies and procedures are equitable, just, and transparent for our students, our goal is to be sure that those values are maintained for our staff. We have spent a considerable amount of time looking at workplace issues, such as professional development, educational experiences, and professional growth opportunities. Student affairs, in my view, has always been in the forefront on issues of diversity and social justice, be it race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. I'm not saying that we have always done it perfectly, but we have always been willing to engage in the conversation with our students and to move the agenda forward. And at this moment in time, we are eager to play a role in helping LMU become an anti-racist university. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm on. Thank you, Dr. Bove, for the commitments you have articulated for yourself and for student affairs. Thank you, Elsie, for your introduction, and a gigantic thank you to all of our participants and especially to the organizers of this final virtual forum of the year. As Provost, I want to assure you that all of the leaders in my areas of responsibility are committed to and responsible for anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. To a person, they have dedicated their careers to DEI and have a body of work that is impressive and inspiring to me. And yet here we are in this moment in time, in society, and at LMU, where we are being called to do more and to do different. I have had the honor and privilege of being in the room for many of these conversations. The affinity groups and people of color in these conversations have challenged me, made me uncomfortable, forced me to confront my own identities, triggered traumatic experiences of my past, and grounded experiences of my present. And I can say with 100% certainty that these conversations were absolutely necessary. We need to get our house in order because that is where our community turns when Asians are attacked and beaten, when yet another person of color is profiled, and when members of the Black community like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and now Dante Wright are senselessly killed. As your provost, I am committed to continuing our conversations, to seeking out advice, to committing resources to the cause, and to the systemic change that our anti-racism project will accomplish. And I want to thank all of you in advance for all the ways we will collaborate to achieve our goals. I now yield the mic to Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer, Lynn Scarborough.
Thank you, Provost Poon. And thank you to everyone who's working so hard on this project. I'm very proud of the direction we're heading here. As I've thought about this past year, I have, in some ways, it's felt to me like it has been somewhat slow, that we've had the opportunity to watch and listen and begin to reflect and plan. And on the other hand, it's just sped by with inadequate time to get things done and to make the changes that we need to make. But I have become convinced that our ability to be a thriving university will depend on how meaningfully we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm committed to that continued work and to that change. And the change has begun. But like all change, it's messy and confusing and frustrating and emotional, as Tom was talking about. And there's no magic wand. It takes time to get things done. And we're going to try some things, and some of them are going to be good, and we're going to share those ideas with each other, and we'll improve the ones that weren't great. And when we see somebody else try something, we're going to copy it. We're going to do more, we're going to do better, and we're going to do it in good faith. In finance and administration, where we are just under 500 strong, we are embracing DEI through focus, structure, and action. We're going to focus on this at our regular meetings, when we step back, when we're at retreats, and we're going to continue to educate ourselves, analyze our progress, and develop and evolve our systemic analysis in conjunction with the Office of Intercultural Affairs. In structure, we are establishing a new position in human resources that will focus on supporting DEI recruiting efforts across the university. This position will also partner in DEI training efforts and will analyze data and trends so that we can measure status and progress to goals. And in action, I have a few examples in providing resources during this pandemic year. My office has been sharing one of our own staff members with the Office of Intercultural Affairs to help support these monthly virtual forums. And we've been providing resources and demonstrating solidarity with our Black community by identifying the Bird Nest as a place of community for our Black students. We're working with them to figure out what needs to be done to fund that work and to get that done. And it's as we make a commitment to inclusive excellence and hiring for leadership, I'm very proud of the appointment of Amy Nguyen as our next Senior VP and Chief Financial Officer. And later this week, stay tuned for an announcement about our new Chief of Public Safety. I'm very excited about this. And again, that should be coming later this week. So again, thanks to all. We are getting started, and I appreciate being included today.
Thank you so much, campus leadership. Now we will transition to a closer look at the President's 3 primary commitments. We will examine the areas of hiring, climate and culture, and education. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Juan Ma E. Bush, Professor of English, who will frame the importance of the first area, hiring.
Hi, Juan Ma Bush, Professor of English and Chicano Latino Studies. Briefly to talk about challenges in hiring, at least one in particular for the moment. Students are the lifeblood of the university, the institution, its bones, a structure in the face of gravity. And then the faculty, staff, administrators, are organs, groups of particular types of tissue with similar function, coexisting in systems like departments and programs to do a particular job. The body cannot survive with just one type of tissue or organ. Absence of diversity is fatal. This is why hiring matters. Yet to heal a body, a proper prescription requires an accurate diagnosis. Part of the challenge is that identity is complicated. When we say Latino, for instance, the problem already announces itself inside the label. Miami Cuban or Zapotec in LA, Salvadoreño in Sacramento, US born or international, child of migrant workers or of ambassadors. What about mixed race? What about gender and class? For hiring then, how do we best assess who we are? And importantly, maybe most importantly, how do we create hiring practices that identify those who will actually work for and with a particular marginalized community? I want to introduce Dr. Jennifer Belichewski Larson, Assistant Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives, to talk about what we're doing in light of some of these difficulties. Thanks.
Thank you, Juan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can walk along with me as I share our work on the DEI data work group. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm here today to talk to you about our work on the data work group. And I'm going to give a brief overview. And as Juan said earlier, we're going to be talking a little bit about what really needs to be done in order for us to move forward, especially in the logistical aspects of our data and the way in which we gather it. So as many of you are aware, President Snyder in his Beyond Words had a threefold commitment to LMU that focused on climate and culture, hiring, and education in order for us to move forward as an anti-racist institution. In his follow-up message, he also identified a specific set of immediate and intermediate actions. And one of those was the formation of a working group. And that working group was the DEI Data Working Group that was comprised of data stewards, faculty, and staff that are working right now to provide the university leadership with recommendations for identification, collection, sharing, and dissemination of disaggregated data. In addition to providing recommendations for DEI dashboards with the ultimate goal of creating and facilitating the sharing of DEI information to promote equity-oriented decision-making. So in alignment with LMU's data governance infrastructure that focuses on quality and consistency, security and privacy, policy and standards, retention and archiving, and compliance, and the charge to promote equity-oriented decision-making at LMU, the DEI Data Work Group has been working on the following 4 goals over the last several months since November. So I'm going to go through each goal to give you a sense of what we've been working on, some of the challenges that we've been encountering, and some of the recommendations we've been thinking through. So the first goal has really been focused on identifying and defining what are those comprehensive DEI data terms, demographic variables that we really need to interrogate to really understand if they're representing and celebrating the diversity of the LMU community. As Juan already touched upon, when we think about race and ethnicity and gender, oftentimes they're very monolithic data terms, and they don't really allow for us to fully understand who is in our community and what and how are we made up? What is the true diversity of who's here? A lot of that challenge is really also connected to the fact that these are externally defined definitions that are provided for us by the Department of Education, because yes, we have to report out on them, but thinking through different ways to create more inclusive definitions that also provide a comprehensive set of options so that when our community members are filling these demographic questionnaires out, they have a chance to see something that represents them versus being clumped into a monolith that they don't actually see themselves in. Then we're also looking at examining those data collection processes as they relate to our newly defined data definitions, and developing a set of recommendations to ensure that we're formally collecting this and that we're archiving it appropriately. This really is focusing on sort of 2 aspects. That first aspect is a lot of times when we think about these DEI data variables, it's really collected at entry. So it's collected in that common application process for our students. It's collected in our hiring process in HR for our staff and our faculty. And so really working with both of these processes to think about how we can add these new options so that our incoming faculty and staff and our students have the opportunity to make selections that are more in alignment with who they actually are. And then providing a process by which those of us who are already here in the community have a chance to go in on a regular basis and make any updates to those identities. And thinking about the fact that these definitions are not fixed once we redefine them. These are ongoing. This process is a process that will continue to be revisited. So thinking about the process by which, as our identities evolve, that we have an opportunity to be able to go in and make changes as we see fit and as we deem necessary for ourselves. The third piece really focuses on that data sharing policy. So how do we ensure that those that really need this data to do the work have access to it? How do we create more transparency around the data that we do have, around access procedures and policies, also around training and security? Big focus here is really focused on, 1, making sure people are aware of what data we have, and also making sure people are clearly aware about how to access it. And then really making sure the university is in a place where we understand data usage and we understand what those best practices are. And the last goal, which is the goal we're working on right now, is really developing those comprehensive DEI dashboards that really provide relevant metrics for our community to be able to look at, to fully understand who we are and who makes up this community. One of the challenges we have right now is that a majority of our dashboards are very student focused and really focused on the undergraduate population. So when we're thinking through recommendations, this is focused on expanding those dashboards to include our graduate students, our faculty, and our staff to create more awareness about our community and who's here, and also to create an avenue for which people in the community and external to us can easily see who LMU really is. Before I turn it over to Mariana, I would just like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share the work going on in the work group. And I also want to share that this is really that first phase of building a logistical data foundation in order for us to move into phase 2, which will really be picked up by the strategic plan and the Spotlight Initiative. First, we have to understand who we are and who is really part of our community in order to begin to do the work of understanding what is the lived experience of our community as they engage here at LMU, especially as we consider the intersectionalities of all the various identities. And that is the next stage of the work that we are hoping to create a strong foundation for as we move forward. In the next couple of weeks or month, we will be sending our recommendations forward, and then we will look forward to getting ready to start on this work during the summer. Thank you, everyone.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. As Jennifer said, my name is Mariana Villa, and it's my privilege to serve as the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships and Initiatives in the Division of Marketing, Communications, and External Relations. My role today is to briefly introduce the importance of examining culture and climate, and then pitch the mic over to our colleague who will spend a few more minutes on this important topic. Let's start with what we mean by culture. I believe it's multiple facets of the word, where we're striving to create an organizational culture where everyone's various cultural identities have a seat at the table. Understanding the importance of culture matters, maybe more than anything else, because our cultures infuse and throw filters on the lens with which we approach our reality. And the only way to reach a positive climate is to allow for all people to feel comfortable sharing their culture and learning from a diverse set of cultures that are unfamiliar to us. Then our organization's true anti-racist culture will become the standard way in which we operate and how we naturally climatize new members into our community. With that, I'll turn it over to Sheila Sameh for more on this topic.
Thank you, Mariana. My name is Sheila Sameh, and it's my pleasure to serve as the Assistant Dean for International Students and Initiatives in the Division of Student Affairs. And I agree wholeheartedly with Mariana's comments on the importance and the privilege of being able to be in a place where we have so many cultures, and the importance of making sure that they have that opportunity to share with us and for us to learn from them. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to share my screen so that I can share with you the process of student affairs' work in DEI+A, addressing specifically climate and culture. Can everyone see that screen? Okay, wonderful. So the Division of Student Affairs is made up of a very diverse array of colleagues representing many different backgrounds and experiences. The division itself is quite diverse in the departments and the offerings for students. We have 16 unique departments that are very diverse, ranging from campus recreation to student health to the Office for International Students and so on. So our approach, we knew, could not be a one-size-fits-all. Our work is being led by the Equity and Inclusion Committee in Student Affairs, which is made up of 6 colleagues of diverse backgrounds and positions. This is not a group of the senior-most leaders in the division, and we felt that was important. We do have subgroups which include colleagues from across the division at a variety of levels and positions. So our process really began with an examination of data already available to us. We wanted to collect information or utilize previous efforts to collect information from colleagues, some of which was collected pre-COVID, as we realized these issues go much deeper than the current climate and all the additional layers that COVID brought and the inequities it really highlighted. This helped to reveal some pressure points with regard to our culture and our climate. So we did utilize divisional staff climate surveys and access staff Senate survey data for student affairs. The next point in our process was for Dr. Lainey Beauvais, our Senior Vice President, to host several listening sessions from summer 2020 that really brought forth our colleagues to share their concerns with Dr. Beauvais. Those listening sessions and the data identified 4 themes in our division that we focused on: communication, transparency, job security, and race. The next move that we proceeded with was to organize focus groups, which we then facilitated by position type and level during fall 2020 to further explore those themes. So we recognize that the themes impact individuals and their work at various levels and positions differently. And we focused the discussion among similar groups, creating an environment where people felt they could share their experiences freely. Multiple groups were held at some of the levels to be able to hear separately from those in supervisory roles, from those that they supervise. And really, this was a process of listening, capturing, clarifying, and working towards understanding. We had many long-term staff in the division who really brought that historical perspective that Dr. Beauvais mentioned earlier, that really, I think, had an impact on our reflection. So to move forward, we then decided to use the Ignatian Solidarity Network's mission-centered DEI plus A matrix. This really provided us a wide scope that centered us in the mission of the division and the mission of the institution, and gave us specific focus to not just do the work on DEI, but specifically anti-racism work as well. The matrix really helped us to explore the individual, the interpersonal, and the institutional, because we recognize that all of these come together to form our climate and our culture. We then shared our recommendations with a very broad subgroup drawn from across the division at all levels of work. They were able to provide feedback, generate ideas for implementation, assist with prioritizing that long list of things we want to accomplish, and really allowed us to capitalize on the expertise present in the division at all levels, wherever the entry point is. We have a lot of talent, and we wanted to make sure that everyone's voices were heard. We made sure to have regular intentional communication with the division, which includes direct updates from our Senior Vice President on this work, regular updates in our staff newsletter, and the committee making itself available to all staff for further discussion and consultation in specific areas. And we really are pleased that so many members of our division have come forward with ideas, with suggestions, and they've really seen themselves in this process. The next step for us in the division is to have all departments conduct a systemic analysis with support from committee subgroups as needed. We will be sharing the experiences, much like OIA created their site. We were very inspired by seeing the work of colleagues across the division, and we'll be doing that for a page within our division so we can share experiences and resources. We are developing an education and training plan that will respond to gaps identified by colleagues to empower all of us in creating and facilitating change. And the DEI committee role is really shifting to a body that's ensuring accountability rather than leading the work. And lastly, it's a recognition that this work is ongoing. This is not something that has an end point. This is work that we need to continue to do and make changes, not only for our division and our staff, but at the end for our students, to make ourselves able to do this work, to then carry that forward to the work that our students do. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Heather Tarleton, Associate Dean for the Seaver College of Science and Engineering, and I want to thank you for sharing your time with us today. In academia, we often claim that our courses are objective and that we teach facts and figures. But the reality is that we teach what someone in the history of our respective disciplines had the privilege to set as the norm. Today, as scholars, we are starting to learn how to decolonize and reconcile our curriculum, and we are beginning to understand and accept that our classrooms are not and should not be colorblind. As teachers, we are identifying the weak spots in our ongoing efforts to create an inclusive educational experience. We are striving to shore up those areas so that our classrooms are spaces where all of our students feel welcome and are encouraged to be whole. In order for this work to be meaningful and sustainable, it has to be taken up by faculty and academic leaders. Therefore, I would like to introduce Dr. Trevor Zink to share with you the approach taken by the University Honors Program.
Thank you. My name is Trevor Zink. I'm an associate professor in CBA and director of the University Honors Program. 5 minutes is too short a time to summarize a year, so I will also drop a link in the chat to some materials that we've published where you can learn more about our philosophy and what we've been doing. So, recognizing my own immense privilege in this space, when I stepped into this position last summer, my team, along with the Student Honors Advisory Council, began simply by listening, making space for students to tell us how they experienced the honors program. What we heard was brave but troubling. Honors, we learned, is seen as a white, straight, cisgendered space that does not value diversity of people or ideas. So we listened further and we discovered that there are at least 3 key factors at fault: our student demographics, our events, and our curriculum and faculty. We're working on all 3, but let me say a little bit more about student demographics. Student demographics start with admissions policies. And so for the incoming class, we completely overhauled the honors admissions process with 3 specific goals in mind. First, we wanted to open the top of the funnel as wide as possible. So instead of inviting applications only from students with high test scores and GPAs, we invited every single LMU applicant to apply to honors. Second, we rewrote all of our marketing materials to remove any exclusionary language and instead focus on qualities that we actually care about, like curiosity and a love of learning. And so our hope was that it would help students who aren't on the traditional honors track in high school to see themselves in the program. And third, we read applications holistically with an eye not only for spotting points of systemic bias, but correcting them. So the changes seem to be helping so far. We did attract the largest and most diverse applicant pool in honors history, and we sent out acceptance letters to by far the most diverse group of honors admits in our history. And as we track the demographics through the pipeline from interest to application to acceptance, we do see a clear trend with increasing representation of traditionally underrepresented groups. So not only are more BIPOC students applying to honors, but proportionally more are being admitted relative to white applicants. And I'm happy to share the data on this as we move forward. But now, Lauren called for hope, but also for accountability. And while I'm cautiously proud of and optimistic of what my team has been able to accomplish this year, I think it would be a huge mistake for us to sit and pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. So I want to make 3 cautionary points based on what we've experienced over the last year. First, I've talked about our efforts in admissions, but as Lauren pointed out, it does no good to attract and admit diverse students if they can't afford to attend LMU. So we need focused fundraising for DEI scholarships, not only at the honors level, but more importantly at the university level. It also does no good for students to attend if they don't find the community or the courses or the pedagogy that speak to their experience. or if the community here doesn't actively center their voices and listen to their needs. We need to be doing all of these things, or the demographics mean nothing. I'll also point out that as an institution of higher education, LMU's commitment to creating equity has to extend beyond the bluff. This spring, I read so many honors applications from fascinating, excited high school seniors who'd be great additions to the program, but who have been systemically disadvantaged in their K-12 education. We at LMU need to decide what role we're going to choose to play in correcting them. You know, we have some ideas in honors for high school outreach and for summer intensive courses, but those things require financial commitments that current budgetary priorities simply don't support, and that's a challenge. Finally, I want to remind us of the humanity that it has to be inherent in all of this. You know, all year, whenever we have stopped to listen, we have heard that LMU in general and honors specifically is not only experienced as a white space, but as an unsafe space. I've heard it this semester from students who feel unsafe and unsupported in their classrooms. I've heard it this semester from students who feel unsafe and unsupported by their peers in our community. That's real and that's scary. So while we in this space engage with DEI as a project with steps and scorecards, let us please never forget that our students, our staff, our faculty of color, members of our LGBTQ+ community live out these uncertain and scary realities daily. It's been a year of reflection, it's been a year of work, and I do hope not to take away from any of the good work that my colleagues who spoke before me have done. But from the perspective of our team and the honors program, and I hope you'll agree, our work is not over. Indeed, it's barely begun. So I hope this little bit of nourishment, but more importantly, a taste of the massive challenges that we share, can give you some food for conversation and collaboration going forward into the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zink. My name is Taina Rodriguez-Berardi, and my pronouns are she and hers. I'm a second-year graduate student in the Yoga Studies Master's program, where my research is focused at the intersection of modern yoga studies and social justice. And this year, I've also had the extreme privilege to serve as the Vice President of Graduate Students at LMU, known as GSLMU. I'd like to thank all of the presenters today for your work and words and the visions that you've shared with us. This work challenges, stimulates, inspires, and pushes us towards goals as individuals, as a university, and as a global community. At this time, we would like to open up the chat and invite you to drop your comments or questions about what you've heard today or about your experience generally over the past year. We will save the chat to learn from these observances as well. So feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat. Seal has just opened that up. And we really welcome all thoughts, all experiences, and even if you don't want to put them widely into the chat, you can DM or direct message the host, and we will allow those to be aggregated as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating and dropping your ideas in the chat, your thoughts. While we do that, I'd like to introduce you to an individual who brings us much wisdom and insight gained from her long history and experience with LMU. Judge Irma Brown retired in January 2021 after 39 years in the judiciary system, most recently in the Los Angeles Superior Court. She was at LMU before there was an LMU, serving as student body president at Marymount prior to its merger with Loyola College, and then went on to Loyola Law School, class of '73. She's currently serving on our board of trustees and is the board DEI liaison to our work in anti-racism. I'd like to turn it over at this time to Judge B.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for giving of your time, your resources, your thought process, your hard work in making diversion, equity, and inclusion a reality for Loyola Marymount University. As was pointed out in the introduction, I sit here today with 51 years of commitment and experience with Loyola Marymount University. It was Marymount College when I started. I was there at the beginning when we moved over to that Westchester campus in 1968. So I've seen a lot of growth and development in our educational program that we offer at LMU, and I'm proud to be a part of the process. So I guess if you do the math, I don't have to tell you that that commitment is longstanding, and it's something that's very close to my heart. I'm a double alum. I'm a parent of a double alum, and we all come from different backgrounds, different perspectives, but the change that we're looking for comes from the top. I can't be more proud of President Snyder and our chair of the board, Paul Viviano, for one, creating this position, for the board to have a closer relationship with the activities that are going on within the university to bring about what it is that we strive to be. And our next board meeting of the board of directors, which will be in first part of May, we will be voting on the strategic plan that I'm sure you've all heard a lot about, but it will become the working document from which all LMU policies, practices, and procedures are going to operate. And anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion are one of the three commitments that the president has made. So when we started this work, well, it's been ongoing, but when we really started with the deep dive in this area this year, it's not just students trying to make changes within the university community, but we see that our administrators, our staff, our faculty, and our students are all equally engaged. And the thing that I think is very special about this as well is that our president has not just set the task out for others to accomplish, but he has continued to be actively engaged by meeting with each and every component of the university to listen to their experiences and to bring them back to senior faculty and staff who have also met with each of the affinity groups to make sure that we remain on target and that the dialogue continues to take us to where we want to be, creating the world in which we want to live. So there was a time when we wanted LMU to be the best kept secret on the bluff in the educational community, but we see under our current leadership of our president, we're no longer that best kept secret, but we are that emerging giant, making strides throughout our educational product, comparing with other schools across the nation. And I feel confident that in our DEI work, we're going to have that same level of success. It's amazing how much we've been able to accomplish in just this last year without having the opportunity to meet in person, to really sit down, have eye-to-eye contact and talk about these issues, but the work is still being done. And I think we've started a momentum that can only increase once we're able to meet together on the campus to continue to explore this work. While we've made strides, there's still work to be done. I think everybody recognizes that it's not a sprint, but it is a journey, and we are well on our way, and we will continue to work until the work is done. Again, thank all of you, Jennifer in particular, for spearheading this effort, President Snyder for making it happen. And I can assure you that leadership starting at the top with your board of directors, that we are equally committed and engaged in making LMU the community in which we want to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Brown. At this time, we would like to invite all participants to complete the evaluation. If you've come to one of the virtual forums previously, you should be you should know that the evaluation is really important to us as an organization and to understand how this forum went and how we can do better. Seal will drop that link for the forum evaluation in the chat. Maybe she can do it a couple times as chat comes in with questions. With that, I would like to turn over the program to President Snyder for closing remarks.
Thank you kindly. And also, Judge Brown, I'm sure those who have not had the opportunity to work with you know that any time one can spend with you really ends up being considered a gift. So thank you for your contributions to our institution, which are legion and obviously continuing in beautiful ways. Our journey toward a better LMU is also a journey ultimately toward a better Earth. And I just wanted to close by noting that our work takes place in specific contexts. So let me link our work with our overall institutional trajectory. Our mission calls us to engage in this work. Our seeking justice calls us to engage in this work, but also our creative drive, that toward which our future calls us to do this work. In no way can we accomplish as a society, as a species, if I may, what we need to accomplish in our rapidly changing, increasingly interconnected and complex Earth without having all voices at the table. Diverse voices, diverse perspectives, diverse experiences brought together in inclusive and equitable ways. Words are not enough. Actions are not enough. It's all about outcomes. I think we've seen today that our anti-racism project is indeed focused on outcomes. And it's also, as part of that, focused on addressing the underlying structural and systemic issues associated with racism. And there are obviously many. We need to change our institution so that we can better equip our students to become yet better, what I call vectors for the greater good. We've seen a couple of examples of that today, who ultimately will change society and redirect the arc of our history toward a more just path. I have faith in each of you. I have faith in us that we will not rest until our culture is changed. I think we have at present an opportunity not just to renew ourselves, but help renew our nation so that it and we can become what America set out to be, what it should have been, and what should always be. So let's work on that together. I thank each of you for being with us. Let us continue to be courageous. Let us continue to be honest. Let us continue to be fierce in our commitment to be better for and with one another. Bless you and have a beautiful day today, at least what remains of it. And take good care.